Coming up next on City Corner, we talk with the co-editor of a new book about the African American fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha. Please stay tuned. Welcome to City Corner. I'm your host, Melanie Adams. Today, we're talking with Professor Stefan Bradley of St. Louis University as the co-editor of a new book about Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Great. Well, I've heard wonderful things about your book, and I've had the opportunity to kind of go through it so we can dive right in. First, let's talk about what's not in the book, because I think that's what when you hear a book about a fraternity and you think you're about to spill all the fraternity secrets. So let's get that out there first.
No. Definitely, and the brothers are worried and that sort of thing. No fraternity secrets. There's nothing from our ritual. There's nothing from, our secret passes and all that kind of thing. None of that is in the book. All of the stuff is public information, and okay. So we worked from there.
Okay, that's really important. So you want to make sure that's out there. Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's important to know that you're a life member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. So I guess, in addition to that, what made you want to explore this topic a little deeper?
Well, there's a couple different things. One is the aims of the fraternity are manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. And I feel like in the fraternity we do well with manly deeds and love for all mankind, but I think we need to emphasize scholarship more. And so I thought that even when I first joined the fraternity, that's one of the things that we could focus on more, that this is 175,000 college-educated men that we should be able to focus on scholarship. And so that was one of the reasons. The other reason is we recently, about 5 years ago, celebrated, almost 5 years ago, celebrated our 100-year anniversary. And so some of us began to ask ourselves, will the fraternity last for another 100 years? And so there are some things that concern Alpha Phi Alpha, as well as all Black Greek-lettered organizations, with regard to some of the behavior and the culture. And so we tried to figure out ways to analytically and critically evaluate the fraternity as an institution, and to figure out what it would take to make this fraternity, this organization, last for another 100 years.
Well, and I think one of the important things, because I think a lot of young African Americans may not know the history of the organization. So you go to a step show, you see people wearing their letters, and you're like, wow, this is cool, this is what you do. And that's not why it was founded. So could you talk a little bit about the basis on which it was founded? You talk about the three principles, but also there are some wonderful members of Alpha Phi Alpha that have done amazing things.
Absolutely. Like so if you were gonna try to explain Black life in America, you would have to explain it in part through the eyes of Alpha Phi Alpha. And so when we talk about this period after Reconstruction, going towards what we would call like the Harlem Renaissance and that kind of thing, that period was something an Alpha man coined as the nadir, this period of just a real low point for African Americans, where rights were revoked and that sort of thing.
Jim Crow came about.
Absolutely, Jim Crow. So the fact that these 7 men at Cornell University, the fact that they were first attending Cornell University, a university period that wasn't an agricultural mechanical school, then the idea that these Black men at an Ivy League school would care enough to do something for somebody else, I think is significant. And so when you go through into the 20th century, you see these Alpha men doing incredible things, including the founders of the fraternity, the 7 founders of the fraternities. We call them jewels, but also various members of the fraternity, from Du Bois to Duke Ellington to so many other people, Robeson and
Martin Luther King,
and Adam Clayton Powell and all these different people. And so yeah. They, when we talk about the civil rights movement, you really have to mention Alpha Phi Alpha. So you look at Charles Hamilton Houston,
right.
who is the mentor to Thurgood Marshall. You look at Lloyd Gaines, who's from around here. Lloyd Gaines was also an Alpha man. And you look at a number of different people, and you have Dick Gregory, who's also from around here. These are all good Alpha members, right. And they've done their part to assist in the upliftment of African American people.
Well, I think it's important to know who's in the organization, because I think that talks about why it was founded in terms of the leadership, the activism. And I think what your book is really trying to talk about is we need to go back to that, yeah. And where it's kind of been lost. So take me through a few chapters of the book and kind of talk about how it was put together, because I think that's also important.
Yeah, some of the early chapters deal with identity, and so we deal with an organizational identity in the first couple of chapters, trying to figure out what exactly is an alpha, and that's what we had fun with that. So we did some research on the alpha male, and so some of the things we found out about the alpha male may apply to some alpha men, and so it may apply in some ways. But then we go to find out how did Alpha play throughout history, and what was the role of Alpha with regard to policy and that sort of thing. So I have a particular chapter dealing with the history of the jewels or the founders themselves, but there's another couple chapters, one chapter dealing with the general presidents. And again, if you want to talk about higher education and African Americans, you have to in some ways do it through the lens of Alpha Phi Alpha. And there's another chapter that deals with Alpha and civil rights. Then there are other chapters that deal with some of the things that are antagonizing Alpha at this point. Those include hazing. Right. Those include how members of out-groups, I guess you can say, are treated within the fraternity and that sort of thing. So what is it to be a gay member of a fraternity? What is it to be a non-Christian member or a non-black member of the fraternity? What is it to be all of those things, and how do those people fare in the fraternity? How do our brothers fare that way? And then we have a wonderful list of members of Alpha Phi Alpha towards the end of the book and that sort of thing. So we have all these different chapters, but probably one of my favorite chapters has to do with the academic achievement of Alpha.
Well, I think in being a university professor and also knowing that the organization is founded on scholarship, I think that's a really important component. So what did you find out about scholarship for today's young Greeks?
Right. And so this is the tough part about doing a scholastic work, a scholarly work, is this idea that sometimes you find things that you don't necessarily want to find. And so as the old people used to say, if you go looking for dirt, you come up dusty sometimes. And so one of the things that we found, and all of this is funny because when I just came into the fraternity, there was somebody who told me, we're the smartest men on earth, and we're the talented 10th and that sort of thing. So now when they finally do some empirical research on this, what they find is that perhaps Alpha Phi Alpha is with regard to GPAs, is one of the highest Black Greek lettered organizations, but in contrast to other Greek organizations, meaning white Greek organizations and that sort of thing, that we're not on top necessarily, and that when you look at the GPAs themselves, they're not as high as they should be, and so there's a number of different things that go along with the idea that these GPAs aren't as high as they should be. Perhaps some of it has to do with selection, but some of it has to do with this idea of pledging and hazing and this sort of thing, which if a student who has, say, a 2.7 GPA decides that he wants to be a member of the fraternity, and he's going to do it the old school way or whatever, well, that means staying up quite a few nights doing things that don't include studying your lessons for school, and because of that, your grades tend to suffer. And so this is one of the reasons why we advocate, or we oppose this hazing and this pledging. That's one of the most enduring problems with hazing and
the interesting thing about it is hazing wasn't at the beginning, because I remember my mother is a Delta, and she's like, when you joined, that did not happen. You were online for maybe a week, and maybe you did one silly thing, but it wasn't the intense semester-long hazing that happens.
Yeah, and part of it has to do with the fact that many of us don't know the histories of these organizations, and so the founders themselves, didn't go through these processes, and then the people that they brought into the fraternity didn't go through these long, drawn-out processes and that sort of thing. And so people always harken back and say I'm old school and this sort of thing, but the founders themselves, particularly one founder named Vertner Woodson Tandy, had explained that you have to stop beating on each other in this way, that it's not helpful, and that others had talked about ways of keeping people out of the fraternity and that sort of thing, that there are better ways to do these things, more ways becoming of gentlemen. And so we agree with that. We agree with that there has to be better ways of selecting members, educating members, and then getting those members to move the fraternity forward.
And it's not old school, like you said. I mean, to say that, I mean, it almost seems like it's an excuse or a reason. And the way, what I've heard a lot of people say is, I went through it, so they have to go through it. And until we're able to kind of break that chain, I think we're going to continue to have the issues.
Yeah, and it's illogical in that way. So if that were the case, then everybody would still be slaves. And so I was a slave, and so you have to be a slave. So we have to use reason. If we're supposed to be the smartest men on the planet, then we have to use reason to advance the fraternity. And this is something that's really injuring the fraternity in a number of different ways. Financially, it's a problem. It's a huge problem financially. Everybody's insurance rates for chapters are extremely high because of hazing. There's lawsuits against the fraternity and that sort of thing. And then just the physical part of hurting somebody is that's a problem. But psychologically, what is it to take part in hurting somebody and to glorify it in some ways, and that's what we want to get away from, because that's a cultural thing within the fraternity.
And I think, and coming up next, we're going to continue our conversation with Professor Stefan Bradley, talking about his book about Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. So please stay tuned.
In times of peace and times of war, in times of joy and times of pain, we need them, they need us, and we need you, the USO, until everyone comes home.
There's a monster in the kitchen.
Keep innocent things from triggering an asthma attack. Learn how to stop their asthma attacks at noattacks.org.
Monsters can be anywhere.
When life's this hard, graduating can be even harder. But you can help Jose and the students in your community make it through by visiting boostup.org.
So I asked my uncle, what's a special interest? He says they run Washington. He said they're groups of special interest in getting bills through Congress or the State House. So I said, I'm a Boy Scout, and our supporters help make a difference by educating elected officials on issues. Does that make me a special interest too? I guess my uncle thinks the Boy Scouts are helping to run Washington. Am I missing something?
Learn more about American democracy by logging on to representativedemocracy.org.
Welcome back to City Corner. Today we're talking with Professor Stefan Bradley, a co-editor of the book about African American fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha. Well, I think before the break you talked a little bit about a lot of your famous members. So I think we have some images that we can pull up, and you can talk a little bit about them in terms of their role in history and their role in the fraternity. So I think those are going to come up. We could see those. Yes.
Right, there you have Jessie Owens, who in 1936 was a member. They call this was the Berlin Olympics, and winning 4 gold medals was an important thing. However, Owens had problems at his own university.
Now, where did he go?
He went to Ohio State University, and so with housing and things like this, and the fact that he couldn't find a job. Here he wins 4 gold medals, but he couldn't find a job after winning the Olympics in such a way and showing Hitler that you know, his iron horses weren't what they thought they were. And so he is a good member of Alpha Phi Alpha.
And it's interesting because I think that one of the themes going through a lot of your members really is that civil rights.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's really
this
interesting.
Advancement.
Right, they've all kind of connected with that movement. And so I think we have a few other images coming up of a few civil rights leaders. Not, we will keep going. Okay.
There's Paul Robeson, who's one of my favorite members. Paul Robeson was one of the most controversial figures in the 20th century. In the middle part of the 20th century, he was what you would call a Renaissance man, and so we were just talking about he acted in Othello on Broadway, but he was also a semi-professional football player. Had attended law school at Columbia University. But he was also a sympathizer of communism.
Because wasn't he on the list then?
He became blacklisted, and so at that time the fraternity didn't come out and support him in the way that many people, you know, years later thought they should have. And so again, this is part of what we're doing with the book is that we're celebrating, but at the same time there are some things that we haven't done right. And so we have to figure out what we haven't done right, correct those things, and move forward. So.
And I wanted to make sure we also had an opportunity. You mentioned that you are co-editors, so you want to make sure, I want you to be able to tell the story on pretty much how the book came to fruition and who the other co-editor is.
Right. The other co-editor is a man by the name of Gregory S. Parks, and he writes and publishes on Black Greek lettered organizations. That's his research. He's a law professor at Wake Forest University. And so I had written a chapter about Alpha in one of his previous books, and so he had contacted me to see if I would co-edit a book on Alpha Phi Alpha in particular, and I told him no at first because we were going to get in trouble and that sort of thing. But then I got to thinking about it, and I thought that it's important that we do this, that members of the fraternity do this, that African American men do this, before somebody outside of the fraternity or outside even the community does it. And this is important that people be able to tell their own story. And so in the previous research and book that I've written, that was a major thing, is being able to control your story and that sort of thing. And so good, bad, or ugly, we were able to explain it ourselves. And so the fraternity brothers and the fraternity in general should know that this is coming from a place of love and not a place of we want to tear down the fraternity.
Right, and I think so each chapter is written by a different person.
Absolutely, and sometimes more than one person. And so we have 22 contributors all in for the book, and so in fact we have 18 fraternity members and 4 who are not fraternity members, but whose research is significant enough to make it into the book.
So how has the national office reacted to it? As I think you mentioned not being sure you wanted to participate in the process. So what has happened? Have they reached out to you?
No. The National Fraternity has not reached out to us in that way, and we didn't expect the National Fraternity to do so. And so this is a book that as much as it celebrates, it also does some evaluation of the fraternity, and that's a touchy thing for the fraternity in general. The fraternity, Black Greek lettered organizations, like Black churches, like other Black institutions, it's problematic in some ways when you start to talk about some of the dirty laundry and that sort of thing, and because people don't want to talk about that. They think that shouldn't be public and that sort of thing. But what we do with this book is we're members of Alpha Phi Alpha, and we feel that we should lead from the front, that Alpha was the first college fraternity for Black men, and we should be the first to step out and to say these are the things that we find not so becoming of the fraternity, and these are the things that are good, but the things that are not so becoming, we have to shore up and do better for the future if we're going to last.
Well, what do you hope people get from reading this book? Like, so what do you want them to leave with?
Yeah, definitely some things that we want them to leave. The first thing is it's important. The scholarship piece is important. We think that for new members or aspiring members of the fraternity, that you have to look at all of the fraternity when you want to join it. The good, the bad, and the ugly, the beautiful, and the beast. And so all of those things are important. Another thing we want people to get is a serious consideration about the role that the fraternity is going to play as we go forward in this nation and in the world, because we have all kinds of world policy programs and things like this, and we want those things to come out in front of the stepping and that sort of thing. Although those are wonderful things, those are
community builders.
Yeah, absolutely, and it traces back to Africanisms and that sort of thing. I think it's wonderful. But there are things more important than the stomp the yard culture and that kind of thing. And so those things are important, that we want more than anything for people to take personal responsibility for their fraternity, and so for Alpha Phi Alpha.
And I think mentioning, you said, it's more than a stomp the yard culture. I think we do have some more images of some of your famous members. So if we could pull those up and see, and we can talk a little bit more about them as well.
Wonderful. Oh, there you have Ralph Bunche, who is so important to international relations. He was actually the first African American to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. King was the second, but here again is there's larger things that we need to, as a fraternity, be concentrating on. And so Ralph Bunche was one of those people that we could say we were very proud of in that way.
Okay, and I think we have about 2 more pictures here, and this is...
Yeah, and that's Whitney Young. He was executive director of the Urban League for so long, and so he did his best. He did his best to make sure that African Americans who came to cities would have a way of making that transition. So as far as housing, as far as employment. In fact, one of the founders of the fraternity, Eugene Kinkle Jones, was for a long time the executive director of the Urban League. Started with $2,500, and by the time he finished, there was more than $1 million budget trying to help Black people in urban areas.
Okay.
So this is, of course, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., and people in New York will recognize him. He was a legislator and a civil rights advocate. He was also the pastor of Abyssinian Church in Harlem, which is an institution in itself. And here again, Alphas were participating in the making of law, in the interpretation of law. So we talked about Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston and all these different people. And so this is important. We want to know who's going to be the next Adam Clayton Powell. We want to know who's going to be the next Ralph Bunche. And are we cultivating these young people in that way?
But it's so interesting because you have such a rich history, and obviously you have to learn it as a member. So I guess where is it getting lost, if that makes sense?
Well, but now let's not take the fraternity out of current context. And so, when you think about all of the things that distract young people today, there's a lot going on, and part of it has to do with individualism and narcissism and all these different things that we have going today. So you think about everybody is, what do you call it, Twittering or tweeting,
on Facebook,
and that sort of
everywhere.
thing. And so everybody's a star in their own right, and so I need you to know, when I've come from the restaurant and that sort of thing. These are things that current members are coming in with. And so we have to make sure and constantly remind them that when you join this fraternity, it's not for yourself, it's for the betterment of all mankind, for the uplift of all mankind. And so these are the things that we need to emphasize, and not so much I want you to remember my name and my my pledge name, and you're my pledge son, and all that kind of stuff. Those things fade. But what's important is we had people like Martin King fighting on our behalf. We had people like Andrew Young and Wyatt T. Walker and all these different people fighting on our behalf to make life better for African Americans in general and the nation. And so these are the things that we need to emphasize more than greetings and that sort of thing.
Well, I think, this really is a wake-up call, not only for this specific organization, but I think for kind of all African American organizations to be able to kind of take a step back and look at why they were created and if they are serving their mission. And I think it's exactly like you said, you have to be able to turn in and look critically at the organization to move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's important that these young people see people today who are doing great things. And so on the book cover, we have Cornel West, we have Wes Moore, we have Randall Pinkett. I didn't know Wes
Moore was one too.
Absolutely.
I guess I need to look at the list.
Yeah. And so, and when you do look at the list, you'll think to yourself, my goodness,
who
the people that are doing things. When you go back home and you look at your coffee table and you see your Jet magazine, John H. Johnson was an Alpha. And so these are the things that we are proud of, but we want to know who's next.
Right, and I think we have a nice cover of the book. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to tell people if they're interested how they can purchase a copy.
Definitely. You can go to the University Press of Kentucky website. It's being sold there. You can go to Amazon.com, and anywhere you buy books, you can order it from there.
Right.
So.
Well, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for people to learn for the first time about Alpha Phi Alpha, but even for members to read a little bit about their history, and hopefully it will inspire a lot of young people to really take up the charge. Because again, I think I'm just really impressed with the activism side and the civil rights side, and that's really important and something that we really need right now. So I would like to thank you for joining us.
No, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, and thank you again for joining us here on City Corner, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.